Welcome back to Brain Strength. This is a series where this average fool tries to teach you a thing or two about sports psychology. This is your host, RJ Lynch, and with my master's in sports psychology, let's get things rolling. In this episode of Brain Strength, I'm going to be focusing on the idea of instinct, intuition, faith, and how this all plays together with mindfulness to help you perform at your best. To start off this conversation, I really kind of want to start with what I call the 3 stages of mind. So the first stage is the beginner's mind. This is the state of mind that we fall into when we're first picking up something. We really don't know a whole lot about it. We're just kind of doing things. It's your first time on a track, first time on a basketball court, and you're just kind of let your body flow and do the things that you think are natural or seem right from like movies you've watched, TV that you've watched. Really, it's just this letting your body try things out and explore what feels right. And sometimes you do it successfully. Sometimes it's a little less successful. But it's just that starting mind where you just have no care in the world, you have no expectations, you just go out and you just do. The second part is not necessarily as cool of a name, but we'll call it the middle mind, the standard mind, the mind where most of us find ourselves in about 95% of the time. So this is the point where you're no longer a beginner. You've actually started doing some practice. Maybe you've had a few games. You're just like doing things more. So you're more conscious of what your expectations are of how you're going to perform. You have more expectation of what something looks like when it's done correctly. You've gone through practices and are starting to learn proper technique, and now you're expecting yourself to do the right thing. We hit this point where we kind of know too much for our own good. We know all the correct things that we're supposed to be doing. We're so focused on it that sometimes we just shut off our instinct and are now focused on this logical, analytical brain of I have to do this perfectly. It has to be exact. Otherwise, I will fail. Instead of being at that spot where you're just flowing, you're just trusting yourself that you know what you're supposed to do. And then finally, we return to the beginner's mind. This is the state that very few people reach. But when you do find it, this is where you really hit flow, where you hit pure performance. It's that state where, yeah, you've done all this practice, you've done all these things, you have this expectation of what things look like when they're done correctly. However, you're able to quiet your mind so it's not focused on, I have to do it right. Instead, your mind is letting yourself do it right. You're at a point in your career, in your sport, where you just learn to trust yourself. You're able to shut off the mind that's thinking like, do this exactly perfectly or you are a failure, to I'm just going to flow through. I'm just going to trust that my body knows the proper technique. It knows the form. I've put in thousands of hours of work. I know what I'm supposed to do. I just have to trust me now. And when we get this spot, this is where the fun really begins. But before I get into that, I really want to define what I mean by intuition and faith. Intuition in this context is that gut feeling that I'm just kind of acting, I'm letting my body go naturally and just hit the spots that it needs to be. It's that thing that comes from deep down in your brain that just says, this is the right path, regardless of what the facts may be in front of you. Maybe you're looking at defense in basketball or football and you're thinking, man, I think I need to check out of this, or I can't do what I want to do. But something in the back of your mind's like, you can make this. You just have to do this or that. It might not even tell you what that this or that is, but you just take that breath and like, all right, I'm going to trust you. And then you find that weak spot, that soft spot that your thinking brain was ignoring because it's so focused on the idea of, well, we have to do this perfect. We have to do it right. Now, sometimes you do have to listen to it, but a lot of times intuition can be your saving grace because it's faster. It's more gut check. It's more instant. And in sport, very seldom do we actually have time to think. Now we got faith. Faith in this context is just trusting in something. And this can be a higher power that you trust that God, that you trust that whatever out there is going to do you right, that if you take the shot, you're going to make it because they want you to make it. Or it's that trust in yourself that I have faith that I have put in the work, that if I put this shot up, it's going to make it because I put in the work. And I'm not going to sit here and say the internal or the external focus of faith is better than the other right now. Just have to have some kind of faith if you're going to perform and if you're going to trust your gut. So now that we have all the pieces put together, now that we see what the definitions are, what it looks like, let's kind of talk about how we move from that beginner's mind to the return to the beginner's mind. It starts with practice. So you've gone onto a court, you've gone onto the field, you've gone onto the track, gone onto the ice, and you've had your first opportunity. You just kind of move through willy-nilly, just doing things. Now comes the hard part. Now we start to practice. We use practice to break bad habits. We know at the very beginning some of our things we do on gut are not good. They can be tells that give away like, oh, he is going to do that now because he did that little hitch step that he always does. Or it could be just poor performances, poor thinking that we do in practice that we're so bad at recognizing a defensive shift. So we use practice to break those habits, to get us into the right spot. And then we use the practice to instill the good habits, to get us to the spot where we need to be, where we want to be. In simple terms, we become who we practice being. So if you do things in practice correct, you're more likely to do them in games correct, most of the time. And whether it's good or bad, practice a lot of time is going to counteract the initial feelings of instinct. And this is good when we have the bad ones. But then comes the next part of learning to trust our new intuitions. Because if we're doing practice right, we're subconsciously putting in these new pathways that we should be able to draw on in games because we've broken all the bad stuff. Now we know the good. So how do we learn to trust? We blend into mindfulness. We use mindfulness because while practice gets us place, it can also instill doubts. Even if we know how to do things, we get to a spot where we start doubting, like, do I actually know how to do this? Am I fraud? Am I an imposter? Am I real? What's going on? And these doubts slow us down. And if we're in a sport that is bang, bang, we can't have doubt because doubt is what ends us. It's what puts us behind. So we might use mindfulness to set us free. We use mindfulness to anchor us in this moment, to take us away from our doubting brain and just put faith into our new intuition. By removing these doubts, by focusing on the present, we get out of these negative spirals and thoughts. And we allow ourselves to just trust our gut, to know that if you've done the work, you can trust the fact that you're going to do things correct most of the time. Yes, you're going to have failures. Yes, things are going to go wrong sometimes. But if you've done enough practice and you're planted in the present moment, just acting on what's in front of you instead of what could be, what will be, what has been, then you're allowed to act and do things correctly. That return of the beginner is so important because while practice reduces our bad instincts, it reduces our bad habits, it instills that doubt and that overthinking. Our mindfulness, it reduces our overthinking and doubt and puts us back in the present. Even though we can never really be a beginner again, it reminds us of that moment where we're just free. This is the rebirth of the new athlete. When we finally hit the return of the beginner's mind, when we've blended the practice and the mindfulness, when we've done them both together, it's a beginner's mind again because we are a new athlete. The mindfulness, it removes our thoughts of who we once were, our doubts that we had because we did this poorly back then, and instills the new us has been reborn as this is you now with new practices, new skills. Trust that. Trust ourselves, trust the world, have faith that you have done things correctly. So that's really the interplay of how these things mix together. This is why we practice. This is why you do mindfulness, so that you can be reborn as a new athlete that is no longer bogged down by the memories of what you were when you were young and stupid. While you might still be young and stupid now, you're young and stupid in new ways. And that's a powerful place to be because that is where performance can take off. That's where you know that I am better now. And if you want more stuff like this, give us a like and follow, subscribe. Until next time, if I say anything today that you found offensive or off point, I hope you can forgive me. And if you say anything in the comments I find offensive, no, I'll probably forgive you. Brain strength, out.